Hi folks, so in this video I want to talk about the Unit 3 argument breakdown worksheet and go over it a little bit and kind of explain some of the things that you want to pay attention to as you do it and just the assignment in general. So if you look at the assignment instructions, you can see that what you're actually going to be doing is filling out a worksheet. So it says you may also want to review your answers to the Unit 2 Reading 2 Comprehension Check. You should also review your feedback because we're going to talk about that a little bit as we work through the worksheet. So you're going to download this worksheet. And if you have already downloaded an older version and started working on it, you might notice I just changed a couple of the instructions to make it a little bit clearer. So I specifically include in this updated version that I want you to use reading 2 is school too shallow. So we're still working with that article because that article is the centerpiece of our summary response essay. So you're still focusing on is school too shallow. And you're going to use it to complete this worksheet and answer these questions. So this is your chance to look into an actual structure of an argument. So I'm actually also going to ask you, it said to choose one claim presented in the article, and I would prefer if you pick the main claim that the author makes. So we're looking for the main claim that the author makes in Is School Too Shallow? Here for article title, you're going to write Is School Too Shallow? And then you're going to write the author of that article. Now, this might seem to you, you might think, but I did this already. I did this on the comprehension check. The second question was, what's the author's main claim? Yeah, you did. But I really want to make sure that we're on the right track as we begin to come up with points in this article in terms of responding to it. So since our ultimate goal is to respond to this article, I want to make sure it's really clear that we know exactly what this article is about. So instead of one claim, I want the main claim. What is the main claim presented in this article? And that's why I mentioned that you might want to go back and look at your comprehension check sheet and also any feedback I gave you on it. The main claim is going to be the central argument of the paper. Remember that a main claim is always the topic plus what the author wants to say about it. So if I gave you some advice, I'm like, this isn't exactly a topic, or you wrote your claim for your topic, go back and pay attention to that feedback. Because what we're looking for when we're searching for the main claim to put here is what the author of Is School Too Shallow thinks about the topic of the article, Is School Too Shallow? So that's what I want you to put here, that one complete sentence. I don't want it to be a question. It shouldn't be, is school too shallow, question mark, because that's the name of the article. It's not a question, it is a statement. What is the main thing the author is arguing here? What is the primary tone used to deliver the argument? So there are some resources about tone that we can kind of back it up and see what we've got. We talked about tone a little bit in Unit 2 as well. So let me find the tone article. I think it's in Unit 2. I actually paused it for a second so I could back it up. It's further back than that. I'm going to link this in the announcement. There's an article called Tone as a Reader, and it's actually in the Unit 1 learning materials under Reading Strategies and Instructions. So you can kind of see that it's located right here, Tone as a Reader. And I'll link that in the announcement. This article talks a little bit about identifying tone. So you can use that to help you out as you figure out what exactly the tone is of the article, Is School Too Shallow? And then this question asks, who is the target audience for this argument? The piece of advice that I'm going to give you is I'm going to tell you to start by typing people who. As I was grading all of my courses database exploration assignments, I was noticing that sometimes there is a tendency to say that maybe the group of people that the article is about are the intended audience, but that's not always the case. A lot of articles written about kindergartners, especially in academic journals, aren't written for kindergartners. So something that you want to really think about as you're figuring out who the audience is, one thing you can do is you can type in people who, and then really think about the people who would be interested in reading this, either from a professional standpoint or the group of people who would read this just out of sheer interest, or, you know, um, in their spare time. If you truly think that a student is going to read an academic journal about being a student in like stem cell, not STEM, STEM education, not stem cell, there we go, STEM education, and like how it furthers critical thinking, then you can include that as an audience. But if you're like, I think that this is actually probably written for STEM educators, then that's something that you want to explain with this people who. So my recommendation when you're trying to find the target audience is to always start with the phrase people who, because it kind of forces you to think about who would actually read this. Who is this written for? I'll just leave the people who there. Okay, so this claim that you put here is going to be backed by reasons. And if, again, you're thinking back to the comprehension sheet, and I can even pull up a copy of the comprehension sheet. If you're thinking back to this section of the comprehension sheet, I went ahead and pulled up a blank version of it. This comprehension check, it does ask you what's the main idea, and that's what you can look at the feedback I gave you and cut and paste that in here after you've made any necessary improvements into this little section right here. But you'll see underneath that you were already asked to come up with 3 reasons that the author gives in R2 that support the main idea. And you might be thinking to yourself, but I did this already. For a lot of people, as I graded this comprehension check, I did include feedback asking, how is this actually a support for this claim? Or what does this mean? Can you further explain? A lot of students actually included some counter argument reasons in this section. And so I want to make sure in this sheet that we're doing, we're really breaking down the argument, that you're making sure that you're coming up with reasons and supports that actually support the claim. So if you say that the main claim of the whole entire article is school too shallow, is that not enough is being done to instill critical thinking in education, if you write as one of your reasons something from the article, like lots of schools have tried to or are currently implementing programs that involve critical thinking, that doesn't support your claim. If you say the whole article is saying that we've got a problem with critical thinking, and then your reason is that your first support that you include is lots of places have implemented programs for critical thinking, do you hear how those two things don't match up? And yet a lot of people kind of got caught up in that trap of just like looking for support in general and more ideas in general and including those as reasons. When you put the main claim right here, you want to make sure that reason 1, reason 2, oh, and it's actually only asking for 2. For some reason in my head, I thought it was 3. No, you're going to get into the counter argument instead. There may be more reasons, but you're only going to analyze 2 of them. So if you had an A, B, and C here, and one of them was not good, and your feedback was like, B doesn't make a lot of sense, just cut it out. Don't use that one. What you want to do when you're vetting these reasons for these 2 sections is make sure that this reason right here and this reason right here actually support your claim. So if your claim is that schools don't teach critical thinking, and I'm not saying that is the claim. In fact, I'm going to tell you right now that that's too reductive. That's not. There's a little bit more to it. It should be a little bit more nuanced than that. But basically, if you think that the claim of the article is schools don't teach critical thinking, don't include a support that says some schools teach critical thinking. That doesn't make sense. Like I mentioned before when you were filling out that first worksheet, if you want, you can type in the phrase because, and then you can go back and erase it when you're done. But if it helps you focus your brain, look at it as a direct correlation. If I were to say out loud to you, schools don't teach critical thinking because some schools teach critical thinking, you would be like, that person is talking nonsense. Force yourself to finish this sentence here, whatever you say, with a because, and see if this actually supports this, because you're looking for the logic of the argument. And this is a hard thing to do because you're not reading the text that you're reading, and many texts you're encountering as a college student are not 5-paragraph essays where you're given a thesis statement, with 3 points, and then every paragraph has a topic sentence going over one of those points. Unfortunately, while that's very clear writing and writing that, I suggest you emulate in how you write in many cases, that's not how many texts that you're going to find out in the world occur. So you're going to be sorting through these articles and looking for supports for whatever you say is the main claim presented in the article. So this sentence should be supported by the reasons that you put here. And then down here, you're going to explain what type of evidence is used to support this. So this is something, when you are explaining a reason or support used by the author for this claim, that you are probably not just going to want to pull a line, as many students actually did. Many students, just for this comprehension, for the comprehension check, just pulled lines from the article and put them 1, 2, 3. You're not really going to want to do that. You're going to want to explain them in your own words. Practice your paraphrasing. What's one reason that this person lists for their claim? What's the one argument they make supporting this general claim? That's what you're going to want to write here in your own language. Work on your paraphrasing. Because then the next question is, what type of evidence is used? Is it a fact? Is it statistic? Is it personal experience? Is it expert opinion? What am I looking at? And to understand a little bit more about the different types of evidence, I'm going to link this article that is listed in the Unit 3 learning materials in the section on critical thinking. It's called Evidence and How to Evaluate It. And it goes over some of the descriptions of the different types of evidence that are mentioned here in the worksheet itself. If you don't see one of them, if you're like, oh, I don't really understand what's meant by something like expert opinion, or I think expert opinion is on here, but let's say you want to know more about expert opinion, Google it. If you want to know more about like the difference between a fact and a statistic, and this article is not helping you figure it out enough, then Google it. Or if you want more examples, use Google to help you figure out what types of evidence are being used to support this. If you're thinking about expert opinion, if you're noticing that the original article is maybe citing research studies or people like in the field, like academics in the field, then that would be an example of an expert opinion. So if one of your claims is something that, an expert in the article agrees with, you can say expert opinion here. So you're just identifying what type of evidence is being offered to support this support for the claim. And then the next section is what counter argument is presented for this particular claim? Did the author refute it? If so, how? Y'all came up with potential counter arguments in your comprehension check. Look through and see if any of that is addressed. I will tell you that there are counter arguments in this particular essay, because this essay is questioning whether or not school is too shallow. And I think in some cases it's saying, yes, more needs to be done. But the counter argument to that would be all of those cases that it mentions where it is being done. So you want to think about the counter argument that's being presented for this particular claim. And for this question about did the author refute it? Refutation is when the author basically says, and here's why this is a problem. Here's why this is not right. So you're asking yourself, did the author respond to any counter arguments? There are definitely counter arguments brought up in the article, but did the author basically respond to them in a way that made them seem like that they weren't as valid points? going against what the author has to say. How did the author respond to this would be another way of thinking of this question. So if you want to take a little note and say, okay, self, this question is asking, how did the author respond to the counter argument? And that's it. That's the worksheet.